Good afternoon and welcome to the last Hawkeye Parent and Family webinar of the fall semester 2017. My name is Lisa Kelly and I work in the Office of Academic Support and Retention, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. If you're unfamiliar with our webinars, they're hosted on the first Friday of each month from noon to 1 p.m. We hope that each one provides you with up-to-date information that may apply to your student's transition to the University of Iowa. We know that parent and family members play a vital role in student success, and we hope that these webinars provide a platform for us to provide you with resources that help you support your student in their success. If you can't attend every live webinar, we do record and post them later on both our website and on YouTube. For more information, future topics, or to sign up for webinars, please visit parents.uiowa.edu and click on the Resources tab. Each webinar has a short presentation and then a question and answer portion where you can get your questions answered by our campus experts. Today's webinar is Homeward Bound, Managing the Winter Break Transition. We are very lucky to have a wonderful campus partner here with us today. Maureen Schaefer is the Senior Associate Director in the Academic Advising Center. She will share information that will help you and your student manage their transition home and make the most of their first winter break. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Maureen.
Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be with you today to talk about this exciting next step for your family when your student comes home after their first semester of college. Some of you may have a reference point for this if you experienced it yourself or if you have older children who have been through this previously, but I'm sure that some of you may be experiencing this for the first time and might like some information and suggestions. During our time today, we'll talk about a few different aspects of the student transition home. First, we'll address what it's like for them to transition back into being part of the family, and we'll talk about what is involved in looking back on the fall semester and how things work with grades. I'll offer some tips on how you can help your student make the most of their time during winter break, as well as plan for spring. And of course, at the end, we can address any questions that I didn't mention. So let's start by talking about their transition back into being a member of the family living at home. If your student came home for Thanksgiving, you likely got a little taste of what it's like to have them home again. You have both gotten used to not living under the same roof for 16 weeks, and it might take a little bit of time to get used to it again. So some suggestions for working through this transition include, first of all, understanding where they're coming from. 16 weeks ago, they experienced a newfound freedom in being able to plan their own day, including going to bed when they want and getting up on their own. They're used to following their own schedule, as well as living with other people who share similar schedules, most often staying up late, taking naps during the day, and sometimes doing things at hours that to most adults would seem odd. I'm sure you may be like me, and the thought of going out for the night at 10:30 seems to be crazy now, but it's normal for them. Instead of waiting for misunderstandings or issues to occur, it's helpful to set some expectations for their time at home. It's okay to acknowledge with them that while they're on break, you still have your day-to-day life that may include going to work every day and perhaps younger siblings may still be going to school. It's important to talk about what is okay and what is not so they know in advance. Open communication is so important to ensure that there are no misunderstandings. It can be also helpful to have a conversation early on about their goals or expectations for break, as well as your goals for them. Winter break can get long for some students if they're not working. I will talk a little later about some suggestions for things they can do during that time. But before we do that, let's talk about the state of mind they will be in when you first see them. Some students had a great fall semester. They transitioned well, they prepared for finals, and are feeling pretty good about college life overall. They're coming home in a fine mood. Other students may have had a rough transition or a little bumpy adjustment to the college level academics and have finished finals feeling not so great. Either way, it's all normal, and we want to help prepare you to help them. So how do you respond? The big question parents often have is, how can I help? No matter how their semester went, you can engage them in conversation to help them to make sense of their experience. So let's first talk about if the semester went well. If it went well, you might ask some questions about why they think it went well. Some questions to ask include, what did you do well? How did you keep up with your classes? What will you do again in spring? And what might change for spring? And I think really importantly, how did you get involved at Iowa? I have found that students who have done well often don't think about the behaviors that have contributed to them doing well. Your questions will help them to process this experience a little more and encourage them to continue with the same behaviors in spring. But even students who did well in fall often can identify what they've learned and how they might do things differently in the spring. I often talk to successful students who still have ideas for how they might do things differently in a future semester. And of course, be sure to congratulate your student on what they did well in the fall. Kids certainly appreciate that positive feedback from their parents, and we know from us at the university as well. So if their semester didn't go well, unfortunately, not everyone has a smooth transition to college. Some students will come home a bit discouraged, and helping these students to process their experience can be extremely beneficial to them. The questions that may be helpful here include, what did go well? This is a nice way to focus a little on the positive and acknowledge that they did do some things well. What did you do that worked? This is another good question to help them realize that their behavior has a direct correlation to how things go. Certainly, they can point to a few things they did this fall that worked for them, and this can be a good reminder for them to focus on these behaviors and continue them in spring. Sometimes we find that students did some things well, they just didn't do them enough to have a significant impact on their grades, and spring really can be a fresh start for them. I love this question. If you had September to do over again, what would you do differently? This question really acknowledges that they have 16 weeks of experience under their belt, and they likely know what they need to do next time. September is a crucial month in the fall. It's early enough that students aren't feeling the pressure of exams or papers quite yet, but what we find is that students often regret not working harder in September to set themselves up for success in October and November. The same thing will happen in spring. We want them to think about what they want to make sure they do in February to set themselves up for success in March and April. The next question, what do you think it would have taken to get an A or B in your classes? This question allows them to think about their behaviors and how they compare to other students in their classes. What do A students do? Chances are they know someone who did get a better grade, and they may have a sense for how that student studies. If not, suggesting that they think about this can be helpful. It can even be a good starting point for a conversation with a professor or TA in the spring when they go to office hours to ask that question. What do students who get an A in your class typically do to set themselves up for success? It's through this process that students realize that students who get A's and B's typically put a lot of time in studying, they always go to class, they typically read before class, and they review material on a regular basis, not just before the test. These are skills that can be learned and practiced in the spring semester. And then I really like the question, what was your experience like outside of class? Because it allows them to take a break from talking about academics. What did they enjoy in their first semester? Did they have a part-time job or an extracurricular activity that's of particular interest? What students don't realize is that every aspect of their experience will provide clues as to what they like to do and a little bit more about their strengths. Perhaps talking about the connection between their outside of class experiences and their major and career plans could be helpful. This quote that you see here on the screen, life can only be understood backward but must be lived forward, is one that I really like because a colleague of mine at the Advising Center introduced me to this. And I think it's meaningful to our work with students and for your work with your students from the parent role. The reason we like to ask students questions and prompt them to process their experience is that things can be better understood looking backwards. And that's important for students to know, that this is a developmental process and things can change in the spring, but they won't change if they don't take the time to reflect. So let's talk a little bit about grades. When your student arrives home sometime during the week of December 11th, they will likely not know their grades yet. The deadline for professors to submit final grades is not until December 20th. Students will be able to see their final grade report sometime during the day on December 21st or 22nd. They should not panic if they don't see it right away. The registrar's office processes grades as fast as they can and as fast as our computer system can run, but it doesn't happen all at once. So let your student know that they can keep checking their MIUI account. The university does not send printed grade reports to students' homes. Students check their grades on their MIUI account. And as you can see from this screenshot, the tile menu on the MIUI that your students will be familiar with displays a few options for grades. One for grades and one for grade report. Prior to seeing their final grade report on the 21st or 22nd, they can click on grades to see their projected grades from fall. When professors submit final grades, the grades show up on this grade screen right away. And students might start seeing these as early as finals week. This is simply a listing of grades that have been reported, but students don't see their grade point average or any of the other information that's on their final grade report on the grade screen. They have to wait until the final grades and to look at their grade report screen to see that information. So I did want to mention a few things that could be noted on transcripts depending on how students' grades turn out in fall. Grading policies do vary by college, so I do want to acknowledge that what I'm sharing now is for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. If your student is in a different college, they will need to inquire about policies in their college. First, we have Dean's List. Students in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences who earn a 3.5 or higher on 12 or more graded University of Iowa hours will have a Dean's List notation on their transcript. And of course, that's a reason to celebrate. That's a great thing. On the other hand, we have academic probation. Again, this varies by college. The College of Liberal Arts and Sciences requires that students have to have a 1.85 or above to be in good standing if they have 29 or fewer hours. And students who have 30 or more hours need to be at a 2.0 to be a good standing. And anything below that is academic probation. We've been told that these two notifications may not be on the grade reports right away when grades are posted, so students who think that they could be in the range of one of these categories should check back at their grade report again after the 26th of December. Academic probation in most colleges means that they have a semester to raise their grades to good standing, and if not, they could be up for dismissal from the university or from the college. We, of course, don't want this to happen to students. In terms of being on probation, but when it does, it's really a responsibility that we have to support students so that they can get back on track in the spring. So let's talk about a little bit about what we do for supporting struggling students. Students who have had a rough academic transition in their first semester will receive outreach from us regarding some of the options we have for students. Students in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences who are on academic probation will be invited to a spring success meeting held in the first 2 days of the spring semester. And at these brief meetings, we talk with students about what probation is, how they can get off of probation, and ways that they can set themselves up for success with their spring schedule and the various resources available on campus to help support them. Students will get a letter mailed to their home address and an email to let them know about attending one of these meetings. We also offer a course called the College Success Seminar for first-year students who have a GPA below a 2.2. This elective course focuses on getting back on track academically. It will cover topics such as organization, time management, goal setting, and study skills. Eligible students will get a letter sent to their home address telling them about this class and how to enroll, and we'll also email them as well. Students who are advised at the Academic Advising Center may also hear from their advisor over winter break. Please encourage your student to read their university emails so they don't miss any important messages. Sometimes our outreach is to encourage them to take advantage of opportunities like the College Success Seminar, and other times we're offering advice for their spring schedule. For example, if a student earned a low grade such as a D or F in a class where they're taking the next level in that class in the spring, we might recommend that they retake the first level. This is called a second grade only option and allows them to take the course again and have the second grade calculated into their GPA and the first one taken out. The first grade always shows up on their transcript, but it can make a substantial difference in their GPA. Advisors will talk with students about other resources on campus that they can utilize in the spring. So let's talk about setting themselves up for success in spring. The choices that they make for their spring schedule can be so important in predicting how the spring semester will go for them. As you might know, students registered for classes before Thanksgiving break, and they may have gotten the schedule they want, or they still may be making changes to their schedule. MIUI is where students register and make changes to their schedules. It's not uncommon for students to continue to check MIUI over winter break and make some changes to their schedules. Courses on MIUI are continually changing due to students changing their schedules, and sometimes departments will add seats in classes. I always tell students to keep checking, and there's a good chance they'll get what they want by the time classes start in January. If they change their mind on the classes that they registered for and they want to make changes, we always recommend that they check in with their advisor about those changes. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about how your students can make the most of their winter break in relation to their long-term academic and career goals. Some students work over break, and that can help the time go by faster. Many students tell us that 4 weeks is a long time and they can get a little bored. If they have some time over break, they might consider doing some things related to major and career options. It's not uncommon for students to be exploring a number of things right now, especially after their first semester. Some students who came in with declared majors may be considering other options now, either a change of major or adding a second major or a minor or a certificate. Open majors may still be in the midst of exploration. Winter break offers a nice opportunity to do some exploring and even getting some experience. There are plenty of things they can do to explore through university websites, in particular the ones that I have on the screen here. The first link to the general catalog is the best place to give them a sense of everything the university has to offer. The Advising Center and Career Center websites will help with the exploration piece. Now that they have a semester under their belt, it might be nice to revisit this to make sure they're in the right major and think about things they can do with their elective hours, such as pursuing a minor or a certificate. Students can also gain some real-world experience by doing a job shadow or volunteering over break. A job shadow can be arranged by contacting a place of employment that they're interested in. This can be easier if they know someone there, but that doesn't have to be the case. Job shadows can vary in time. Sometimes students do them ranging from a number of hours to a full day. Either way, it's helpful for them to see the environment they might consider working in after college. Another benefit is that they make a connection to someone who's working in the field that they're considering. Volunteering can also be a great way for students to get some exposure to something related to their major or career interests. Students considering a career in teaching can volunteer in a school. Students interested in healthcare might volunteer at a hospital or medical clinic. Your community likely offers some options and can give students a chance to think about what they might want to do after graduation. We also encourage students to ask adults they encounter over break about their work and their education and or training for that work. Most young people are not used to asking adults about their jobs, but they can learn so much by doing this. Encourage them to ask relatives, neighbors, friends, parents, ask them about their background and how they got to where they are currently. Through these conversations, students often realize that most people's paths are not linear, and quite often people continue to learn about themselves even after graduation and through their first few jobs. Closer to the end of winter break, it can be good to talk with students about their return to school and their goals for the spring semester. Typically, these come from your discussion of how fall went. Processing their fall semester really helps them to give a sense for what they want to accomplish in the spring. Some of their goals may have to do with study skills and time management, and it can be helpful to discuss what they will do differently in the spring. Spring is also a time to get more involved on campus for those students who did not get very involved in the fall. They can explore our Center for Student Involvement and Leadership website over break to explore all of the great student organizations at Iowa. And the main goal with asking questions about the spring semester is to encourage your student to be intentional when they return in spring. If there's something that didn't go quite as they liked in the fall, help them figure out what they can do in the spring to make it better. We want them to make the most of the spring semester because every semester is important to their overall growth and development. Before you know it, they'll be returning for their sophomore year. Before I turn it to Lisa for questions, I want to make sure that you know that we are here over winter break. Students get a nice month off, but offices are still open with just a few days that we take off for holidays. If you or your student has questions about their grades, classes, or plans for spring, please don't hesitate to contact us at the Academic Advising Center. Many of the advisors in my office take some time off over break, but students can check our online scheduling system or call the office to find out about their advisor's availability over break. And there's always someone in the office if a student's advisor is out and they want to talk with someone right away. But I think our main goal is to answer questions and take care of any schedule changes before students return in January. So now I'll turn it over to Lisa for any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Maureen, for all this helpful information on making the most of winter break. We'll now move on to the question and answer portion of our webinar. Please keep in mind that our presenter is unable to answer questions about specifics about your student's experience, but she can provide information that may be helpful in guiding your student. If you have a question, type it into the question box on the side. We'll then read the question so all participants can hear, and then we'll answer the question. If we're unable to get to your questions during the webinar, we'll follow up with you via email. We'll just wait just a few seconds and see if we have our first question. Okay, first question. I don't think my student got very involved on campus in the fall, and I want to encourage them to get more involved in the spring with organizations and things. What's the best way that I as a parent can do that?
That's a great question. The website that I made reference to earlier, the Center for Student Involvement in Leadership, is probably the best website that you could look through together, because I think all of us encourage our students to get involved, but we kind of leave it up to them to do that. And if you notice some hesitance in doing that, I think you could pull that up together and kind of explore. One of the things I love about their website with the student organizations is they break them into categories. So there are service organizations, there are academic organizations, some that focus on volunteer. So you can help them navigate, because I do think that it's very overwhelming. And we quite often hear from students, in my first semester, I really want to focus on my classes, so I'm going to get involved later. But I want them to have a plan when they come back in spring so that they can go to the first meeting and get involved right away. So that's probably my recommendation, the Center for Student Involvement and Leadership website.
I'll add one thing to that too. We know that students who work on campus between 1 and 20 hours a week technically often have a higher GPA than students who don't work. So if your student wants to get involved in maybe getting a campus research job or an on-campus job, they can go to Hire a Hawk over break and start looking to see if there's job opportunities. And then if there's not a whole lot over break, there'll be a lot as soon as they come back. And that can be a great way to make some money and also get to know different people on campus as well. Another question, can I get access to my students' MIUI to see their grades if they won't show them to me?
That is a good question. So at orientation, parents and students were given information about the guest account that parents have access to. So that is probably what I would refer you to if you want to. And Lisa, you're welcome to say anything more about that. But it's not exactly what students have access to on their account, but there is some guest access for parents.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely, students, FERPA rules, students are adults, so it is about they make the choice about to give access to that, but, typically you can work with them to ask them questions and get to kind of a sense of how they're doing. And then if they want to give you access to that, that's a way to find out a little bit more about how they're doing. So next question, is there a job fair or activity fair for spring semester? Do you know? I know there is.
Well, I believe we just received an email about it. I was thinking that was going to happen before.
There were a few right at the very end of the fall, and I do believe there's a few more in the early spring. Every student is on a listserv. It's like UNIV admin or something. And whenever student groups or student organizations are doing fairs and things, they will get emailed about it. So that's another opportunity to encourage students to be checking email pretty regularly so that they don't miss out on important dates like that. But there typically are some fairs in the early spring and then some again kind of in the late spring to kind of looking forward to next year. We don't know dates off the top of our heads though.
I do believe this would be listed though on the student employment page. So we're sorry we don't have it right off the top of our head, but.
Yep. Let's see. Oh, you mentioned, here's another question. You had mentioned the UI GPA and the cumulative GPA. What's the difference between the two of those? And what if my student is higher than one but not the other? What does that mean?
That is a great question. And at the bottom of a student's grade report, the university actually keeps track of 3 GPAs. And so this really, for a first-year student, is only relevant if they have transfer credit. But we do find that more and more students every year are taking dual enrollment in high school. So more and more students have a GPA from their transfer work. So at the bottom of the transcript, we keep track of their cumulative GPA, which is every college class they've taken. So it includes courses at the University of Iowa as well as transfer coursework. And then they have a UI GPA, which is just what they've earned at the University of Iowa. The reason it's important for students to understand both of those is because academic probation decisions that the colleges make look at both of those GPAs. So let's say a student did well in their transfer work and they have a 3.0 coming in, but with their UI GPA in the fall semester, they're below that 1.85. They would be on academic probation because of the UI GPA, even if the cumulative GPA is higher. So that's really important for students to look at the bottom of their grade report when they see it at the end of the semester to fully understand where they stand with their grades.
Another question. I have a sophomore and a freshman, and last year my sophomore came home, or my now sophomore came home and slept till noon all during break. Is that normal? And how can I get them to participate more in family life?
Wouldn't I be famous if I knew how to answer that question? I have 2 kids too, and they have completely different. I think that's an interesting question because I do think that different students respond to not only college but life in different ways, and that can maybe be why it's so important to talk about the expectations and the goals for winter break at the beginning of winter break, so that students know what the expectations are if there are goals, because I do think that some students just are naturally going to be more productive, and others, given no structure, are just going to sleep all day.
All right, that's all the questions we have right now. So we want to thank you again, Maureen, for joining us today. All webinars, again, will be posted online at uc.uiowa.edu/family-resources. You can see that on the web slide right there. If you have additional questions that we didn't get to or that you think about later, you can send those to uc-retention@uiowa.edu. It's the email address that's on the slide right now. And you'll get a response from a University of Iowa staff member. And then please join us for the first webinar of 2018, which will be proactive planning for next year. This will be February 2nd from noon to 1 o'clock. There's not a January webinar because everyone's on break. Thank you so much for joining us today. On Iowa, go Hawks.